Hello there and welcome. My name is Joy KahNah, and in today's video we are going to talk about whether or not Peace Corps service is a good idea for those of us who are empaths, highly sensitive individuals, or who are naturally psychically gifted. This video will be based solely on my personal experience as a Peace Corps volunteer and now as a psychic, and it does not in any way reflect the views or values of the US government or United States Peace Corps. The first thing that you should know is that I have been to and lived in African communities twice. I did this first in 2010. Here is a picture of me during that experience. And this was an experience that was sponsored by a leadership program at my university. And overall, this was a really positive experience. It was definitely challenging. I had to raise thousands of dollars, and it was a self-led initiative that I did as part of a team where we were working to construct an educational community center. So it was a lot of hard work. There was some culture shock, but as you could probably see, I was pretty happy and I was pretty balanced. So 2 years later, as a graduate student, I thought it would be just fine to request to return to Africa again, this time as a Peace Corps volunteer. It was part of a program called Peace Corps Masters International. So serving in the Peace Corps was going to serve as a replacement for doing a thesis project, and I thought it would be a great way to make a difference in the world while completing my degree. But that is not exactly how it turned out. My first experience in Africa was in the country of Ghana, and my second experience in Africa was in the country of Benin. Both of these countries are in West Africa and are very, very close to one another. Here is a photo of me after a couple of months in the Peace Corps. Now, those of you who are very sensitive to energy will probably be able to see right away that I'm not doing as well as I had been doing during my previous experience in Ghana. In this picture, I was more happy than usual because I had just gotten a wonderful package from a loved one. But even here, if you look at my eyes, you can tell that I could have easily been crying because I was so emotionally unwell. Here's another picture of me from my Peace Corps service. This one is during the Peace Corps training, and here I am with my host family. Again, if you sort of tune into the energy of this photo, you'll probably be able to tell that I am pretty uncomfortable. If you like these photos, watch to the end where I will be sharing more photos from my Peace Corps service. Now, as you may expect, based on the introduction, my short answer to this question is no. I do not think that it is in the highest and best good for most empaths or most young psychics to be involved in the Peace Corps. I wish that it was, but honestly, I would feel very, 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 very guilty and very, very bad if I encouraged any of you to serve in the Peace Corps. Because very honestly, in my particular experience, I would say that my Peace Corps experience was one of the, if not the worst experiences of my entire life. And I know that this is largely because of my psychic sensitivities. I'm not saying that Peace Corps service is wrong for everyone. I'm just saying that the less sensitive that you are, the less empathetic that you are, the more likely that you probably are to have a lot of fun and have a great experience. Okay, so here are the 8 reasons why the Peace Corps can be problematic for empaths and psychically sensitive individuals. Number 1, there is not a lot of time alone. And I know that that might surprise a lot of people because you're thinking, what? I'm going to the developing world and I'm going to be more connected to nature and it's going to be great and I'll have a lot of time for rest. I thought that it would be that way, but what I didn't give enough thought to is that every Peace Corps experience starts out with 3 months of intensive, very, very bureaucratic, very, very overscheduled and overbooked training. If you've ever experienced a college orientation, and you know how busy of a day that can be, or a weekend, or a couple of days. Imagine doing that every single day for 100 days in a row. Or if you've ever gone through recruitment for a sorority or fraternity or something like that, imagine doing that every single day for over 3 months, and that is what you can expect during Peace Corps training. Training was very, 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 very hard. I was very sleep deprived. As a highly sensitive person, I need a little bit more sleep than the average person. I need about 9 hours or 9 hours and 15 minutes per night. That was completely impossible. Between all of the courses that we were taking, the homework that they were giving us, and then the required activities, there wasn't enough time to rest. And I ended up getting very, very sick and having trouble learning the language because I simply didn't have enough time alone. We had to live with host families, and my particular host mother was mourning the loss of her husband, and it was not an emotionally healthy environment to live in as somebody as sensitive as myself. So that's the number one reason. If it wasn't for the Peace Corps training and you could just pop into your site and get to work, it wouldn't be anywhere near as toxic as it is for empaths and highly sensitive people. Number 2, unfortunately, in my experience, the Peace Corps administration propagated a culture of fear, very similar, though to a lesser degree, of what you might expect if you were serving in the military. There were a lot of rules, there were a lot of warnings, and they constantly told us things like, if you don't take this or you don't do this, you could die of this disease. And they used volunteers as examples of what not to do early in the training. Volunteers who made just like one mistake, they would cancel their program, send them back to the US. It was really scary. I didn't feel safe at all. There were tons of rules, and it was hard to remember all the rules, especially because they taught most of them in French. That was the language in Benin, but they taught most of them in a language that I didn't speak or understand very well at that time. And I constantly was walking on eggshells, and I was terrified that I was gonna do something wrong and I was gonna get sent home. Number 3, and this is a big one. It doesn't necessarily seem that big at the time, but trust me when I say it's big in the long term. You are inundated with vaccinations. I am not sure what was going on with the vaccines during my program. All I know is that I had been to Africa in a neighboring country less than 2 years prior, and I had all of my vaccines from that trip. But during my Peace Corps service, I was given a handful of vaccines every single week. We would have these big lectures where every volunteer would get together once a week on Friday. And while the lectures were happening, which by the way contained very important information and were often not in our primary language, so we had to focus very, very closely to understand, they would take us in the back of the amphitheater and they would vaccinate us. And a lot of people didn't pay attention to how many vaccines they were getting, but I did, and I would ask because sometimes I would be given more vaccines than what we were told that we were going to get. For example, we would be told, okay, today you're going to get, yellow fever and typhoid, but then I would go in the back and I would get 4 or 5 vaccinations. And when I asked the nurse, what am I getting and why, I was basically laughed at and told, don't worry about it, get back to your seat. People that are psychically sensitive and empathetic, we have very sensitive nervous systems, very sensitive bodies, and it may honestly not be worth it for you to get pumped with formaldehyde and heavy metals and other additives of vaccines. Yes, I understand that overall it is for our safety, but if you have a very sensitive body, then you probably don't want to be exposed to this amount of medication and vaccination. That leads me to point number 4. You will be forced to take prescription medications. In my case, we were forced to take an antibiotic, which was an anti-malarial. I understand why, but that antibiotic destroyed my digestion. It's been almost 5 years since my Peace Corps service, and I have completely committed myself to trying to heal my body ever since. Yet my digestion still has not bounced back from the damage that was caused from taking antibiotics for 9 months. So I have taken probiotics, I've done colon hydrotherapy, I've done coffee enemas, every single day I take digestive enzymes, I have done everything imaginable, but I simply am not able to eat the foods that I was prior to the Peace Corps due to compromised digestion. Additionally, every single female was prescribed birth control, and I believe that they did this in case we were raped and because they didn't want any of us to get pregnant. However, I had not been taking birth control prior to the Peace Corps, and the birth control made me extremely sick. I gained almost 40 pounds because my hormones got so out of whack, and I had pretty much perfect hormonal cycles before the Peace Corps. Afterwards, I had huge ovarian cysts that had to be removed surgically, and I also developed endometriosis, hormone-related migraines, all kinds of issues. It definitely was not worth it. The Peace Corps is touted to be filled with idealistic volunteers who just want to help humanity and fill the world with peace. And there are definitely some Peace Corps volunteers who are that way. However, overall, based on my experience, the culture was similar to the worst aspects of middle school. It was very cliquey, it was very gossipy. It just wasn't a safe place for a highly sensitive person. It was just awful. It really was awful. The culture amongst the volunteers was awful, and I think that even volunteers who were not super sensitive found it to be awful. There was an enormous amount of alcohol and drug abuse amongst the volunteers. I myself have never been somebody to drink alcohol or do drugs at all. Even in college, I just knew to stay away from those things because of how sensitive my body was. However, I was most definitely of the minority in the Peace Corps. I believe that most of the volunteers, or a lot of the volunteers, were depressed and they were trying to drink to numb themselves. What scared me more than that is that a lot of the volunteers were buying and taking prescription medications. The healthcare system in Benin was very different. It was a system where if you had money, you could buy prescription medications. And some of the medical volunteers were supplying painkillers and highly addictive prescription medications and distributing them amongst the volunteers. So it was basically a drug culture. There was essentially what would be illegal drug dealing going on amongst the volunteers. So they may have been having a good time because they were very drunk or very high, but I was sitting there thinking, this is not at all what I signed up for. And finally, there is enormous bureaucracy. The Peace Corps is a highly bureaucratic organization, and they must report all of their budgets to Congress. Therefore, there are many projects that may or may not be that helpful or even desired by the local communities, but that you will be highly encouraged, if not forced, to complete. So I was really saddened by the amount of bureaucracy. I guess that I should have expected it, but it was really disappointing. They spent a lot of time teaching us how to write reports. We had to spend so much of our time writing reports, documenting everything. I got the very strong impression that the most important thing was to write that you did certain projects in your reports, whether you did them or not. The whole thing was just very upsetting to me as somebody who values honesty, and as somebody who had gone through a lot of training, both having an undergraduate degree in global leadership and then also having finished my master's coursework in international nonprofit management. It didn't feel right. The level of bureaucracy prevented innovation. The level of bureaucracy prevented common sense, I think, in some respects. I think that the bureaucracy blocked a lot of opportunities for genuine humanity. So in conclusion, if you are a psychic or you're an empath or a highly sensitive person and you want to make a difference abroad, maybe look for a smaller program that is less bureaucratic, or go into the Peace Corps. If you go in with wide open eyes. If it gets to the point where it's really negatively affecting your mental, physical, or spiritual health, then give yourself permission to leave. You've got to put your well-being first. You may want to help those in need, but the truth of the matter is most of the people that you will be helping are probably helping you more than you're helping them. Most of them are okay with the way that their lives are, and most of the people that I encountered had found a level of inner peace that was much higher than that which most Americans knew. The idea that Americans have everything figured out and that the rest of the world needs our help is not a true and accurate representation of the way of the world. Make sure that you tune in with your heart to any volunteer opportunities and really feel into, honestly, whether it's going to be a match for you, whether it's going to give you enough time alone and enough time to recharge, whether or not you're going to be able to do work that you feel passionate about, and whether or not the people that you're serving with are going to be healthy and balanced individuals. So I hope that that answers your question. And like I said, I wanted to close the video by sharing some of the photos from my own Peace Corps service. I don't want to make it sound like the whole thing was terrible, it wasn't, but on a whole, it was one of the worst experiences of my life. But it did lead to something very good, and that was my spiritual awakening. This right here is the concrete wall of my Peace Corps house. Here on my wall, I had initially wrote health, happiness, and love as my goals that I wanted to achieve in my life. So during the Peace Corps, I came to understand that love was the most important experience that I wanted in my life, and shortly after my Peace Corps experience ended, I did fall in love and I met the person who is now my husband. So that's something wonderful that came out of it. Here's me with some of the female students at an NGO called Life for All, and these girls were learning how to sew and how to do beautician sort of work, like how to put in hair extensions and hair weaves and things like that. And it was an honor to be able to help at their school. You can see how unhealthy and uncomfortable that I actually was. I don't have many photos from this time that really show my body because I definitely deleted all of them. I think here, if you tune into it, you can really feel how uncomfortable I was. This next photo is a photo of me 2 days before I left for my Peace Corps service. And my main reason for sharing this photo is so that you can compare it to the next photo from just 4 months later. So here I'm sitting with some boxes that I had ordered from Amazon and things with gear that I would need for the Peace Corps. And here I am 4 months later sitting with some of the same items actually as I was about to depart for a work-related trip. And if you look at the tension in my face and just look at my body, you will realize that in the span of 4 months that my general sense of wellness had decreased substantially. Next, I have a happy photo. This is me with a person who pretty much saved my life during the Peace Corps. I was so lucky to be assigned a language partner for our language learning during training, who so happened to be a miracle child, literally, of 2 shaman parents, and he really helped to hold space for me during my Peace Corps service, and he tried his best to instill a lot of spiritual understanding in me, though I didn't really understand or embrace it until several years later. Here's another photo of the girls at the center here. They are dancing as part of their graduation ceremony. Their dance was absolutely amazing. I am not a dancer at all. I wish that I was, but they definitely had skills. Here's a photo of me from just a couple weeks into my service with my host sisters. They were so cute and so helpful, and they would often help me with my homework and my French language learning, and they would joke with me a lot about how easy my homework and stuff was, but it felt really hard to me. But they were the sweetest, and they definitely helped to make my Peace Corps experience a little bit better. And here is the final picture of me. This is from the very end of my service, although I didn't know that it would be the end at the time. I actually was given by my neighbor, I was given a kitten for Christmas, and I named the little kitten Nook. I thought that was a cute name at the time. About 2 weeks after this photo was taken, I lost consciousness for 8 days. I just collapsed. Afterwards, I was in the Peace Corps Medical Center for a month, and then I was eventually medically evacuated to the United States and eventually discharged from Peace Corps service. For someone as sensitive and psychic as me, the Peace Corps experience was one of the most toxic environments imaginable. And I think it got to the point where my higher self, my soul said, listen, this is over. I would never say that anybody's decision to join the Peace Corps is wrong, but since you all asked for my advice or my opinion about whether empaths should be in the Peace Corps, I have to just give a resounding no. I hope that this helps some of you, and I hope that the people who need this video will stumble upon this video. And yes, I'm just wishing you all just the most wonderful forms of service that are a true vibrational match for your soul. So thank you again, and namaste. Bye.